Hello again, welcome back. I've talked about this in a different way before, but I think it's easy for us old gits to remember that as younger people come along, they don't necessarily know all the stuff that we do, and they don't remember things, they weren't there at the time. And it's not just in terms of the lessons we can draw from historical accidents. It's other stuff, more cultural, social things that have happened, possibly in our own lifetimes. And we need to teach the young people about those things. For instance, it was interesting this year, of course, which marks the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi concentration camps at the end of World War II. That there's been a lot on TV about the Holocaust and what happened during the war. And that is probably news to a lot of young people. They haven't come across it before. Similarly, there are cultural events that are represented periodically to a new audience. And I mention that because I have been watching, it was quite good actually, I thought, a TV series on the Profumo scandal, or the Christine Keeler scandal, I think they call it these days. If you were around at the time, I was quite young, but if you were around at the time, you'll remember that it involved the Minister of War, John Profumo, who was having an affair with this young woman, who was also having an affair with the Russian defense attaché at the Russian embassy, Yevgeny Ivanov. It was a big scandal, not least because Profumo had lied to the House of Commons about the affair. But what it also did, more significantly, culturally, was that it opened up to public awareness just exactly what those in charge were getting up to behind closed doors. You've got to remember at that point, it was only just over 15 years since the end of World War II. The UK was still recovering. And it was in the control of a group, a clique, if you like, generally referred to as the establishment, who are mostly men, mostly been to the same small number of schools or had been in the guards together, who ran the country. And it marked, if you like, the beginning of the opening up, the social opening up of the country that Philip Larkin wrote about when he said that sexual intercourse began in 1963 between the end of the Chatterley ban and the Beatles' first LP, noting that, unfortunately, which was rather late for me. And I mention this also because I've been asked by some to give viewers from outside of the UK some indication of what's going on with Brexit. And I've been reflecting on Brexit a lot, obviously. And one of the things that I think it fundamentally represents is a reversal of the process. I think of it as progress that's been made since the early 60s in social terms, in terms of sexual liberation, if you like, and the decline of, or the no longer acceptability of racist or homophobic attitudes, and so on and so forth. And I think there's an element amongst those who don't like Europe and voted for Brexit, who don't like people who don't think the way they do. So I'm a bit worried about that. But I suppose what you were asking for is some idea of what's going on in terms of the chemical logistics sector. Well, not much, at least at the moment. The UK has now left the European Union, but we're in a process of transition that will last at least until the end of the year, quite possibly longer, considering how much still has to be done. in order to prepare us for life alone. There are some worrying signs. There have been comments to the effect that there's no reason why the UK should follow EU rules, for instance, EU standards. I don't think there's any idea that we're not going to apply ADR and RID. But reach is an issue. Will the government want to carry on with that? And then there's the fear that we may end up in a two-tier situation where goods and services for the UK are produced to a lower standard than those that are sold into the EU market. Bearing in mind the chemical industry in the UK sells quite a lot to the EU market, I can't imagine that they're going to run parallel manufacturing systems somehow. So if you're worried about Brexit, you can forget about it for another few months, I think, at least until we have a better idea. Also, I would caution, I wouldn't pay too much attention to what the government is saying, because I think a lot of that is them saying what the right-wing press wants to hear. And for instance, our Prime Minister did promise that he'd rather be dead in a ditch than miss the 31st of October deadline, which went whizzing by with him still in place. And also said that the exit agreement was oven ready, which made it sound like a turkey, if you ask me, but then we shall find out. So don't be too despondent yet. We don't know really what's going to happen. Check back with me in about 6 months and maybe we've got a better idea. That's it from me for today. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.